Version 6.1 is adding 2 new game-changing weapons that you can obtain pretty much for free, and they might actually change the way we value weapons moving forward. In this guide, we'll break down what these weapons do that makes them so broken, which characters works best with them, and the game-changing impact they may have on the game. Hello, welcome to Genshin Filter, your quick guide for everything Genshin. So let's get started! The Nefer and Farina banners are here, and I know topping up in-game can get really expensive. Here is how you can save money with today's sponsor, Loot Bar. Loot Bar is a safe, secure and reliable way to top up Genesis crystals, with up to 25% off compared to in-game prices. That includes the new Chronicle Nexus. Plus, new users get a 10% off coupon, and returning players get 8% off. Loot Bar has worked with many well-known creators and has great reviews, so it's very safe and trustworthy. The process is super simple. Choose the deal you want, enter your UID and server, and you are done. It's 100% safe and delivered just under 30 minutes. And yes, PlayStation and Xbox players can use it too. Loot Bar also supports other games like Honkai Star Rail and Withering Waves, so hit the link in the description or pin comment to try it yourself and start saving. And thank you Loot Bar for sponsoring this video. Firstly, the way to obtain these weapons is by pulling on the coming weapon banners. Now, even though it's considered free to play, I do want to stress that getting the weapons you want on these banners is never guaranteed, and sometimes can take a lot of pulls. But if you are looking at the statistics, the chance to get this weapon is much higher than the 5-star on the banner, even though you can't guarantee it, so just keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to this weapon's rarity compared to the other 4-stars we got over the years, unlike the usual substats we get, like attack, ER, EM, or sometimes even HP and defense, these weapons will have crit. Hoyo presented it like it's another standard release, but this is a very rare and big deal, as crit weapons are usually considered some of the strongest and most valuable weapons in the game, as crit is commonly one of the most impactful stats to increase your character's damage, and it's also not that easy to obtain a lot of it. That's why crit weapons usually tend to be reserved to the 5-star character signatures, the Battle Pass and the Black Cliff weapons in the Paimon shop, which are all very costly and not considered free to play at all. The only free-to-play 4-star crit weapon in the game is the Witset, which was introduced to the game 5 years ago when the game was released, and since then we haven't gotten even one free-to-play 4-star crit weapon, which did make the Witset one of the most powerful free-to-play catalysts we had. We do have some 3-stars weapons with crit, which sometimes made them very competitive with even some of the 5-stars weapon, and that's saying a lot. But because they are 3-stars weapon, it does limit the amount of stats they can have, and also the power of their effects, as both the Witset and the 3-stars that give crit do have some very annoying limitation in their effects that really holds them back, while the 5-star effects are usually not that limited and give way more stats. And now, for the first time in 5 years, we are finally getting new free-to-play weapons that have crit substats. And what's actually even more special about them is that their effect is also really good and almost not limited at all, and giving stats that a lot of meta characters really care about, like attack, elemental mastery and energy recharge, making them some of the strongest and most valuable weapons right out of the gate, especially when it comes to the new Notecry characters, which will probably define the meta for the coming year. On the surface, it's a really cool move by Hoyoverse, but under it, this might have some game-changing consequences that will affect the value of all the other weapons in the game, especially if this is not going to be a one-time special case. So let's break down these weapons, see what they can do, and how they stack up to the rest of the competition. Dawning Frost is a new 4-star catalyst. It has a base attack of 510 and 55.1% crit damage. As for the effect, at R1, after the wielder uses a charge attack, he will gain 72 EM, and after using the elemental skill, he will gain an additional 48 EM for 10 seconds for a total of 120 EM. And at R5, it goes up to a total of 240 EM increase, which is a very high amount. It's very similar to the Witset, giving 55.1 crit damage as well, and also can give even double EM, reaching 480 for 10 seconds at R5. But because of the very annoying RNG chance to get a buff you don't need, and then the fact that the effect has a cooldown of 30 whole seconds, meaning you will have a full rotation where you don't even get any buffs. And because of that, I would argue that the Dawning Frost is a much better weapon, as it's more focused with no RNG and no cooldown, so you will have a full uptime. That puts it at Nefer's third best option at R5, above most of the 5-star alternatives, which is very impressive for a free-to-play 4-star weapon. It's also a great option for most EM scaling catalysts, both on and off field, given the buff lasts for 10 seconds. But I will say that even though it's an amazing weapon, it is still the less impressive of the two for a few reasons. Firstly, us having another free crit 4-star catalyst with the Witset since release does reduce the value of this weapon, as if you played for a while you probably already have an R5 Witset laying around. And if you don't mind doing a lot of resets in the Abyss or Stygian Onslaught, then the Witset can be stronger in these specific situations. Secondly, the buff can't be procced from off-field, which in long rotations makes it less impressive as the effect won't last. And if we are on the topic of long rotations, it does require using a charge attack to activate, which some characters who will appreciate this weapon stats do not use in their rotation, so it makes rotations longer and uncomfortable as a result. And lastly, its refinements affects its value a lot for the characters you want to use it with, as the difference between R1 and R5 is pretty high, and getting its refinements it's not easy, even though it's still considered a free-to-play weapon. But don't get me wrong, even with all that, it still sits now as one of the best free-to-play 4-star catalysts in the game. Sacrificial Staff is the new 4-star pull-out. It has a crit rate substats of a laughable 9.2%, which is the lowest crit amount of any weapon, and at first glance you might think it makes it pretty much irrelevant. But at a second look, this translates to a whopping 620 base attack, which is the highest amount of base attack I've seen on a 4-star weapon. If this was a sword, it would have easily been Bennett's best 4-star weapon. All jokes aside, this high base attacks makes every attack percent buff much more valuable, as the attack percent buff scales directly from the base attack of the character, which can only come from the character's ascension and the weapon's base attack. And thankfully, the effect of this weapon gives a lot of attack percent buffs, making this weapon crazy when it comes to how much total attacks it gives you. As for the effect at R1, after the wielder skill hits the enemy, their attack will be increased by 8% and ER will be increased by 6. And you can stack it 3 times for a total of 24% attack and 18% ER increase for 6 seconds. And it can be procced from off field. At R5, with just one stack, it goes up to 16% attack and 12% ER increase, which is already very nice. But if you can get the 3 stacks, it will reach 48% attack and 36 ER. That is insane, and easily Ineffa and Escoffier's best free-to-play weapon, which are the best supports for 2 top DPSs in the game at the moment. It also works amazingly for many other great attack scaling characters, even if they can't get the stacks from it. Sacrificial Staff and also the Dawning Frost, walking with such a good roster of great characters and being so strong truly skyrockets their value to be some of the best 4-star weapons in the game, and makes other weapons value like the Battle Pass or the limited 5 stars, which cost money and tons of wishes, much less attractive and valuable. They still won't be better than the signatures, but they are a very competitive option, which is impressive for a free-to-play 4-star weapon. But like Dawning Frost, Sacrificial Staff also have some drawbacks. Firstly, it wasn't on Flynn's or Ineffa's banners, and it being on Nefer's banners is probably the worst case. A lot of people who pulled for Flynn's and Ineffa won't pull for Nefer as well, and vice versa. And if we are on the topic of the banners, just like Dawning Frost, Sacrificial Staff refinements does affect its value. And getting its refinement it's not easy, even though it's still considered a free-to-play weapon. Another issue is that it needs to be stacked, which does limit the effect to specific characters. But even at 1 or 2 stacks, the weapon still stays one of the best options for pull-arm attack scalers who also appreciate the R in their kit. And lastly, it gives crit rate and not crit damage. For a while now, the main DPS artifacts in every region since Fontaine are given a very generous amount of 30 plus crit rate, and that made crit rate the less sought out stat of the two, as it's very easy to overcap on it, which if you do overcap makes that valuable stats useless, where crit damage has no cap and will improve your character's damage the more you have of it, as long as you have around 80% crit rate, which is much easier to achieve these days like we said. But even though it would be better if it was crit damage, the upside is that it gives only 9.2 crit rate and focuses everything on delivering a very high attack numbers, which a lot of recent meta attack scalers really appreciate, and on top of that also gives a good amount of ER. So, is Hoyoverse just being extra generous, or is there a bit more to it with this weapon release? If this is just a one-time thing, I think it's a very cool move by Hoyoverse, and we'll keep this weapon as one of the best options moving forward. But the game has been raising the power scale of characters and constellation these past 2 years, which resulted in older characters dropping completely out of relevance. So it does raise the fear that if they start releasing this level of weapons moving forward, it will do the same to the weapons, making even 5-star signature drop in value as they get older, which I think would be much harder to bring back to relevance. And also, the new signature will now have to give much better stats to make it worth to get them. But we will have to wait and see where things go. Anyways, if you're going for Nefer and these weapons are on a banner, I think it's an easy choice to try to get a weapon rather than a C1, as it's a bit stronger than a C1, and yes, Forina's weapon is not the best, but it's not that bad either, as managing to get these weapons along the way, and maybe even some refinements, is a big win if you have someone to use them on. But if you are not going for Nefer, it might actually be worth it to give 20 to 30 pulls to try to snipe them, if you have any to spare. But don't overcommit to more than that if you don't want the 5-star on the banner. And that's a wrap. If this video helped you in any way, consider giving it a like and subscribe for more Fit the Guides. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.